Okay, I think we have a healthy numbers. Let's just start.
Okay.
Good morning to everybody. Now, welcome to this next launch. I'm quite excited. When I first had this book in my hand, congratulations, Reverend Kenety. The first thing that caught my attention, because I would normally, this book is just like a bit over 200 pages, which means I would take about 6 hours to read this from my practice of correcting work at the university. But there were some few aspects that helped me on this book. Like there were some really good reviews at the beginning. And when I read the first some few chapters, I saw this one particular one from Bishop Nathaniel actually captured what I had in mind, a roadmap of a true African independence. And these are the kind of things we want to have in our minds. Not that we don't have, we have them bits and patches all over the place, but it's nicely put together by Dr. Kenety, by Reverend Kenety now. And it's kind of a reference too. But he insisted he would like to stay on chapter 16, which I think is unfortunate. I think we'll still have to expand into the other chapters as we
Right,
move.
right.
But I'm quite excited to give him the mic to introduce himself and tell us what moved him. Because another thing I noticed about him is that he has an edge for technology. He loves it. He creates. So everything we try to do, he does it like 2 times and gives us his own copies. So I'm excited. Now I'll give him the mic to introduce himself and just tell us what moved him and what is behind his generational shift so we can enjoy his vision.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Dr. Ango. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we probably, most of us here on this line probably have the same background. I came here to the US as a young child, not very young, but as a college student. I went to college, graduate school. Then I worked in Chicago for about 15 years as a pastor. And while I was there, I went back to school. So Rena, we have a similar background. Mine is in global health from Northwestern. It's called global health, but it's pretty much like public health from Northwestern University in Chicago. Uh, and then we had Ebola, then we had a pandemic. And over again, when I traveled back to Africa, I just, it was just right in your face, the poverty, the suffering is like, being thirsty while you are in the river. So, if you look at African history, when the continent was colonized, divided among the Europeans and colonized, our forefathers, they had a vision and the ambition to free themselves from colonial, freedom, from colonization. And so there was this wave of freedom that went across the continent. And so it came across my mind, what do we have to do? As much as I like to help, I do not have the kind of disposable means, to offer as much help. But then it came to my mind, well, what is lacking in Africa is a mind shift. It's a mind shift in the way we look at ourselves and in the way we have allowed others to look at us. And then as an ordained minister, I begin to think what in fact is the will of God for his creation. It says will that one segment of his population is dependent on another segment of his creation, or that there should be interdependence. And so I came to the conclusion that it is God's will that we should be, and scripture backs this up, that we are meant to be interdependent and not dependent. So what this means is that every nation and every individual has to have to strive and work towards being independent. So if our forefathers fought for colonial freedom, then this generation, it is our challenge to take it to the next level. So if you see the cover of the book, it has a baton on it. That baton, simply means that, the baton is being passed to our generation for Africa to work towards, financial freedom. Many of us know how many of our young people try to get into Europe or Asia by all means, leaving behind a vast continent that is full of resources. People are dying in the ocean. People are dying in the desert trying to get into Europe. So that's what inspired the title of the book, Generational Shift, that there has to be a mind shift. And once, like our forefathers, when they shifted their mind and they sought for colonial freedom, then it is time for this generation to shift our mind towards financial freedom. And that's what inspired the title of the book. But I worked very hard to not make it a book of complaints. As I said earlier, I lived in Chicago for many years, and Chicago is known for one of those, civil rights movement. It has a lot of history of civil rights movement, and a lot of the civil rights movement people that we know today lived there. Obama's house was not, in fact, far from my house. Then you got a Jesse Jackson, you got all these people. But there were those, if you look at the civil rights history, there were those who complained about the system. And then there were those who found solutions about what is happening. And so I worked hard on the book to ensure that it was not a book laying out complaints about what other people are doing to Africa to keep Africa poor and to keep Africa dependent. The book, in fact, provided solutions and pointed out examples from throughout the continent about people who are experiencing success without going nowhere. They are finding local solutions to local problems. So the book is full of examples. I can go right away to Kenya's M-Pesa, but there are a lot of other examples throughout the continent, throughout the book, of how. So it covers, it's very broad. It covers a lot of topics. It covers what can the diaspora community do, for example, to build, to build and help out in Africa. So during the research, I found that Ethiopia is one country that has done very well in terms of encouraging diaspora investment back on the continent. And they are doing it in a very, very organized way. Rwanda is another one. Ghana, of course, we all know. And there are other countries now who are intentionally encouraging members of the diaspora community to come back and invest, whether it be knowledge sharing, whether it be direct investment. But Ethiopia has this thing called diaspora bond, which in some way, even brings return to those who invest, in the bond. So that's a broad introduction of the book, the intent behind it, what was the inspiration for writing a book, and what can we do to make Africa prosperous, to make Africa interdependent and not dependent, to be a global player, to be at the table, and not to be, there is a chapter about the youth. And, that chapter, I like that chapter too, because the chapter is saying basically Africa should not sit and become consumers, but we should strive to be producers. Africa, if you look at the biblical concept of giving and receiving and living, is the first fruit go to God. Then the cream of the crop goes to the owner of the household or of the land. But as it stands, Africa is not enjoying the cream of the crop. For the most part and for generations, it seems Africa is receiving the crust of the fruit of its own land. And so these are the things that are broadly addressed in the book. I will start briefly to see if anyone has a question, and then I can expand more on if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you. So while we wait for Pro, I'm just going to go back to chapter 16. In this chapter, you touched a lot from colonial to STEM, digital transformation. You touched everything. So what is particular about your chapter 16 that you kept on saying you want to focus on chapter 16?
Well, when you write a book, there is, you are seeking an outcome. So this is not, when you write like, you write poems and things, sometimes it's just for the enjoyment of the readers, of to inspire some ideas, and give some wisdoms and insight, to some of life problems. But the way I wanted it, I wanted like some serious outcome. Like, what can we take out? What would be a takeaway from the book? So everything that is lying out, that is outlined in the book, I wanted the readers in chapter 16 to be challenged and say, because if you look at the very cover of the book, you have uh, a quote here from Gerald Williams, who said, "We must create an Africa that is strong and able to bequeath a legacy of self-worth, self-dignity, and national pride to future generations." So if that generation strives to bring about what Africa is today, which is free from colonial powers, but still very dependent on, on foreign entities and other foreign nations, um, to for its survival. I wanted for there to be, for people to understand that we have a challenge. Our generation have a challenge to have to build an Africa that is financially free and that becomes a contributor to world affairs, not just a consumer. We can't let other people continue to make decisions for us. We can't just be consumer of foreign products. And if you look at things, when we, like, there are local problems, there are local concerns that Africa has. And who can find the solutions? Nobody but Africans, you know? And it suggests that we don't, so innovation, digital transformation, and all of those things, what is suggested in the book is it's not that we have to originate everything, but we can take global ideas and localize it, for our local problems. Or we can originate, which is what, entities like M-Pesa is doing. They have taken this digital transformation to the next level where, traditionally banks are bricks and mortars, right? Bricks and walls. But M-Pesa in Nairobi, Kenya, I was just there a few weeks ago, they've taken it to the next level. So you don't have to take $100 to the bank. You don't have to take $200 to the bank. You can have it right on your phone in an account. And also, if you look at, and Rena may probably know a little bit of this too, if you look at some of the discoveries that are in the West, these were African ideas. We just did not figure out how to commercialize them and make them popular. So people come and take African ideas, then take them to market, to convert them and take them to market, which then always leaves Africa at a disadvantage. So that's why I wanted to leave something with people to say, look, we can, if we are going to shift our mindset about Africa and make Africa prosperous and make Africa desirable and make Africa, a place where you can grow your family, where you can grow wealth, where you can build dignity, then these are the things that we have to do. And so chapter 16 is a challenge to this generation to take Africa to the next level of strength and true independence.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Reverend. There's one thing I learned about your book. You carefully move through your chapters in a way that I think you plan your things very well, from the book cover to everything. And I would like you, before we go on, so you can read at least a chapter of your book. Your chapters are not very long.
No.
Yes. And I think I'll still just insist, the time you read, you will still read your favorite chapter 16, which is what lies in your heart so much. But I'd like you to talk about your chapter lineup, because you actually have a smooth way of going through these chapters. Like it's really in bits and chunks, not really very heavy chapters. I really love it the way you put it. So you're moving from reimaging tradition. It means you first of all want to go back to the drawing board and navigate and see what is going on. Then you see innovation. Then you go to governance and accountability. Then you have entrepreneurship, economics. Then there's this one thing about the pillars of personal growth. Righteousness stands inside this thing, and justice, a call for moral and just leadership. There's a whole spiritual backing behind all of this, the African youth and the catalyst. That would be my next question. And then the capital escape, building in cultural innovation, this intermingle. Then women as pioneers. That was actually, I was happy to see this chapter, environmental stewardship effect. So please tell us, you have this role and it's moving on really smoothly into each other. So tell us what prompted you, what really gave you this lineup, this outline. You did it so nicely.
Right. So as I said from the beginning, I wanted the book to be a book of solutions, that provides solutions, not a book of complaints. So I didn't want to talk about, what people are doing to Africa, how they are stealing from Africa, how they are taking Africa's ideas and taking it to market and all of that. I wanted it to be a book of solutions. So that's why I cover a lot of topics. That's why I went over a lot of things to ensure that that there is youth, there is women, and it starts with reimagining tradition. Because if we begin to think of African tradition, shifting our mindset, then we'll begin to think about youth, for example, the role of youth in society. You can't continue to give adults the role and leave youth until at a certain age. We can begin to give youth a role in life and in governance and in decision making very early on. And we have to reimagine or rethink the role of women in society. Africa has moved way ahead. We have made advances in gender differences and things like that, but still, in the core African mindset, there is still the gender divide. And other societies are experiencing the same thing. So I pointed out. So I gave very pointed examples of strong African women who made a difference, even during colonial time and in present time. So I just wanted to be sure that there was a flow, in terms of how the chapters went and how the readings went, so that each chapter builds on the next, and that there was something for each, for each group, for each group of people. So you got a woman, you got youth, then you got a diaspora, then you got government, and governance, then you got innovation, entrepreneurship and technology. So, the way things are designed right now, not just in Africa alone, but probably, but mostly in Africa, you go to school to get a job. The book is challenging that. We should start teaching entrepreneurship and innovation, to our students in schools, so that when people come from school, people don't go to school with the mindset that you can only go to school, learn, and get a job, but that you can become a producer, and instead of working so hard to become a consumer. So we can become producers. Africa can, contribute very vastly toward the well-being of the globe in which we are. We can't just be a place where people come and take things, extract, and then go and develop it and return it to us, in finished product, and then, at a more expensive price.
Wow, thank you so much. So let me pick, this is your day. This is your day, Reverend Kenety. So let's do this. let's pick the preface and then chapter 16. I would like you to read it out. We have an audio version, the Audible, but it's good to come from you. We want to experience your emotions on this. So the preface and then the chapter 16. To me, you said it was a challenge, but to me, it was more of a proposition. This is what you really think should be moving on at this time. And there's too much fact in that because we really have them bit by bit in our minds, but we really don't voice them. So we would like to hear you read these patches of your book so we get your whole emotion, the whole vision from your passion.
Right.
Why you wrote
Yeah,
it down.
I can read a preface. Africa
Okay.
stands at a defining moment in its history. Across the continent, we are confronted by the realities of both profound challenges and boundless opportunities. As the world rapidly evolves, Africa's response must be equally dynamic, driven not by the echoes of outdated mindsets, but by a bold embrace of new ideas that reflect our current realities and future aspirations. Generational shift mindset, break cycles, and embrace new ideas for Africa's growth is a passion project born out of a deep desire to see Africa flourish, not just in potential, but in reality. This book reflects on the historical patterns and inherited mindsets that have constrained progress for generations. At its heart is a call to action for a new generation, one willing to question, challenge, and ultimately break free from the cycles that have held Africans back. The journey of writing this book has been fueled by a love for Africa and a hope that its people, both at home and in the diaspora, can come together to envision and enact a future of true independence, prosperity, and inclusion. It explores critical issues such as brain drain, capital flight, trade deficits, social justice, and the power of aspirational thinking, while also offering pathways and principles that can guide us towards an Africa where every individual has the opportunity to thrive. This book is not just a reflection on the present, it is a bridge to the future. Each chapter serves as a beacon, an invitation to explore, rethink, and reimagine. We must move beyond external dependencies and outdated loyalties and embrace a vision that fosters self-reliance, innovation, interconnectedness within the global community. To the reader, whether you are a young African seeking a way forward, a leader faced with difficult choices, a member of the diaspora yearning to contribute, or simply someone who believes in Africa's promise, this book is for you. My hope is that it ignites a conversation, encourages action, and inspires a lasting commitment to a brighter, bolder, and more inclusive Africa. Together, let us break the cycles of the past and build the Africa of our dreams.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will take the opportunity to welcome a very special guest you brought us here. You are welcome, sir. This is Dr. Flo Lumumba. And yeah, let me just decode it. So, and he just came on time. This is like good because I know you connected your chapter 16 very much to him. And this is the time also you'll be reading it, but I would like to welcome him. And I saw during your meeting in Kenya, if he would just say a word, we just want to honor him with a word, and then we can go ahead. So you read your chapter 16, and then we can see the connection. So, Dr. Flo.
My dear Prof, welcome, welcome, welcome. I was greatly honored when I was in Nairobi recently to be received by an honorable man. I sought his attention. I've been following him for years and years. I shared with him that I read everything that Martin Luther King Jr. has written and everything that Nelson Mandela have written. But those two people, they have passed. And I'm trying to keep up with Prof. Lumumba. I've listened to a lot of his his talks, but I cannot, honestly say that I've listened to everything because, he continues to produce. So I'm really, really honored, Prof, that you are on here this morning. Well, it's in the morning here to us. But I know it's late there in Kenya. But welcome.
It is evening here in Kenya.
Thank you. Mhm.
Let me start by congratulating you, my good brother, for writing this book,
Thank you.
Generation Shift, because this book not only captures the essence of what Africa is going through now, but what it needs to go through. And you now join a generation of great Africans. You join a generation of those in the diaspora, such as Sylvester Williams, who talked about their Pan-African movement. You join the generation of Marcus Garvey, who recognized and reminded us that we had to think about the mother continent. You joined the generation of individuals such as W.E.B. Du Bois. You joined the generation of John Henry Clark. You joined Martin Luther King Jr. And you joined the generation of individuals such as Kwame Nkrumah, and I dare say Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere, by telling us, as Kwame said on that day when Ghana regained our independence, that the independence of Ghana meant nothing until the entire continent was free. When you talk about generational shift, it is about the intellect, it's about the mind, because the mind is the standard of who we are. You who are resident in the United States of America will remember these iconic words of Malcolm X, that when a person has been so used to use the back door, even the back door is closed and the front door is open, they will still look for a back door. You are telling us, not in so many words, and indeed perhaps in so many words, that this generational shift demands of us and requires of us that we must think differently. I've had the advantage of looking at your book, and you are telling us the time is now. The time is now to think differently. The time is now to act differently. The time is now to relate differently. The time is now for us to move differently. And I can guarantee you that some of us who believe in what you are doing will be the wind under your wings. Do not despair. You must say with us that we are incurable optimists as we look towards regenerating Africa. May God bless you and guide you and guide all of us. Amen. As we launch this book on this 20th day of the month of September in the year 2025. You have done a great job. You have immortalized your thoughts in the written word. There'll be no shortage of those who criticize you, those who critique you, those who applaud you. But you have done what must be done, immortalization of your thoughts in the written word. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
I'm humble.
Good. Thank you so much. Reverend E, before we move over to the questions, yeah, I know chapter 16 is not long, but there are quite a few pages. Would you want to read all or just some few points you made?
I'll read a few. I'll read a few pointed ones. Then, and it's chapter 16. I hope everybody get a copy of the book. Let me just summarize it. So let me read a few. Let me just read about, let me read something. Africa's fight for colonial freedom remains one of the most defining moments in modern history. It marked the dawn of a new era, a moment when the aspirations for liberation, self-determination, and sovereignty began to take root. After centuries of exploitation, subjugation, and disenfranchisement under colonial rule, African nations started to emerge from the grip of European domination in the mid-20th century. This chapter revisits the monumental struggle for independence and argues that today's generation must carry the torch in a new fight, one that goes beyond political freedom to secure economic independence, share prosperity, and continental leadership on the global stage. That's basically so. It's so then you go on. It kind of outlines the colonial struggle a little bit. The independence Africa's colonial period formally began in the late 19th century following the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, where European powers convened to divide the continent among themselves. This so-called scramble for Africa saw colonial powers such as Berlin, France, Belgium, Portugal, and Germany carve out territories for the purpose of resource extraction, stripping the continent of its raw materials, labor, and autonomy. Colonialism dismantled traditional systems of governance, imposed foreign political structures, and left behind a legacy of structural economic imbalance. Among the most devastating consequences of colonial domination was the transatlantic slave trade. Over centuries, millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homeland and subjugated to unimaginable suffering. Their labor was exploited to build the wealth of empires abroad, while their societies were shattered at home. This system of forced extraction not only dehumanized an entire continent, but also established the foundation of systemic inequality that persists to this day. The legacy of the slave trade is deeply embedded in Africa's socio-economic fabric and underscores the need for a united push to dismantle lingering structures of external control. Yet Africa's resistance never ceased. Through the colonial era, African societies pushed back through uprising, passive resistance, and intellectual advocacy. By the early 20th century, leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, and Patrice Lumumba of the Congo emerged as visionaries for African liberation. Their fight extended beyond mere independence. They envisioned a united, self-sufficient African capable of charting its own path. The movement gained momentum after World War II as global anti-colonial sentiment intensified and European powers exhausted from the war could no longer maintain control. Ghana's independence in 1957 marked the beginning of sweeping decolonization wave. Over the following decades, centuries, countries such as Nigeria, Algeria, Kenya will follow, securing freedom through negotiation, mass mobilization, and in many cases, long and painful armed struggles. One of the most powerful symbols of the liberation era was Nelson Mandela. While political independence was achieved, the post-colonial period introduced a new set of challenges. Many African states inherited fragile institutions, artificially drawn borders, and underdeveloped economies. The lack of economic infrastructure and administrative capacity, coupled with divisions rooted in colonial strategies, made nation building a complex task. Moreover, external control persisted in more subtle ways. Former colonial powers, new global actors continued to exert influence through multinational corporations, trade dependencies, foreign aid, and structural adjustment program. The first wave of liberation was about reclaiming political agency. The new wave must be about building economic autonomy, generating wealth from within, and establishing Africa as a global force, not one defined by need or dependency, but by value, innovation, and leadership. I will stop there if there's any. Then I want to bring up a very specific example, but I want to see if anybody has any question or comment. So
let me thank you for that, and then I'll just let you talk.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
Any questions from anybody?
One thing, Kennedy, one thing that's like top of my mind from the beginning of this conversation is, when you mentioned that people come to the continent and they extract, ideas, resources, and they go back and they sell them. It's like they discovered something new, right?
Right.
And I'm wondering, why is this happening? Could it be, when we're talking about mindset, could it be that when you are, a continent of so many resources and riches, and that maybe you don't know what you actually have, so then you're not,
So right.
selling or, making
Right.
value
Yes. So I think the colonizing powers were very intentional in terms of what they left behind. Because, the thing with colonizing people, you have to capture their mind. Mind is the most powerful natural resource that God has given to us individually. You have other resources in the ground, the oil, the gold, the diamonds, and all of that. But your brains, your mind is it's the biggest asset that God has given to all of us. And so they were very intentional in capturing the mind. So that people will, and part of the strategy was, look, if you're going to capture these people's mind, the way to do it is to keep them poor and then uneducated or poorly educated. Because when you do that, you can control their behavior. So there were systemic structures that were left behind that still that left behind this mind of dependency. Prof. Lumumba is the one that said, you can go to, a guy goes to school in Nigeria, he goes to Ibadan, for example, for 10 years. And then he comes to Columbia University or Harvard for a certificate program for 2 weeks. Then he takes a bumper sticker and put Harvard on it, on his car, but not Ibadan, where he has spent 10 years. So it's a mindset. Let's look at what is going on right now with Africa, for example. Every year, and Prof. Lumumba talked about this too, every year we have these conferences, where, China-Africa conference, and all the African presidents will go there. Then you got America, then you got Japan, and all the African presidents. What if we are the ones that they want value from, why can't our African leaders get together and invite the president of China, invite the president of the United States and Japan and say, come, we want to trade with you in a nice way. We want to trade with you. We want you to come to Africa, and then we will collectively negotiate. But so far, one guy will call and everybody will go there instead of having our African leaders being the one to invite investors to Africa. So these are some of the mind shift that I'm talking about. And, the system that is left behind, it makes Africans to think that we can produce quality products. So, I remember when I was growing up, you used to wear a t-shirt. I have a friend in New York, for example. Well, how about your friend right next door, But it's a mindset shift. So if it's a mindset shift of what we value, in terms of where is this from, who made this, and we have not been able to produce or to establish manufacturing plants. If our African leaders can get together, we can, have some manufacturing plants in different parts of Africa, and then there is an intra-trade. I was, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was in Nairobi, Kenya, and when I visited Port Lumumba, one of the discussions we had was post-harvest loss, for example. The African farmer will work all year round, and when their produce comes to market, some of these produce, they are so perishable, you have maybe 5 days to sell them or they're going to perish. And that's simply because there is, there is a very limited market in which many of these farmers can get into. But if we have road networks and we are able to get from one country to another country quickly, farmers can get their produce into multiple markets. So the question you asked is a very important question. Can Africa produce quality products that satisfies African? And that's a very good question, that we have to have a mindset shift, towards producing quality products so that people don't have to think beyond Africa. And it is happening, it is happening.
But more specifically, my question was geared to Africa not knowing its true value and other people seeing it and taking advantage of that. So I'm speaking specifically to the mindset.
Yeah.
Other people seeing, your light, your offerings, but you don't see that, then that becomes a problem. And that makes you ripe for extraction, which seems to be what's happening. So, like Professor Plow said about, I think he said he attributed the quote to Malcolm X, but I think it was Carter G. Woodson who said in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, that when you imprison the mind, you no longer have to tell that person to go a certain path or go, like they will, if there is not a door for them to go through, they will carve out that door that their mind is telling them that's where you belong, right? So, then the challenge becomes breaking out of that mindset and understanding your true value and your true freedom.
Right. So it's a good question. Does Africa not know the value that it has? The first question comes to knowing whether Africa even knows what value it has. So, so still today, to do any geological survey in Africa, Africa has not developed the equipment to do those surveys, to know the values that they have in the grounds. There's only a few that we know about. We know about oil. So there are countries that are producing and exporting oil. We know about gold and diamond. But, recent discoveries or recent need, like for, solar power, the batteries, the rare minerals also. We have to somebody has to come from outside of Africa to come and discover these minerals, these rare minerals. That's number one. Number two, so you don't know the value you have until somebody comes to your house and says, wow, you got something of great value here. But okay, so now you say, oh yes, I know I have something. Okay, thank you for telling me that I have something of great value. But how do I translate it, or how do I transform it, or how do I refine it to a usable product? And this is where the problem comes in, because, okay, now I know I have a valuable product, but I cannot translate it or, refine it, so that it becomes a marketable product. So the person who discovers that you have a valuable product, they are the same ones who have the manufacturing plants to produce it and turn it into, into the kind of product. So knowing what you have is value is one thing, Finding out what you know is value is another thing, and then turning it into market product. You know, I'm from Liberia, and I can point to a specific example. We have Firestone. Firestone have tire factories all over this country. You are in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm sure you have seen Firestone all over the place. Firestone has been in Liberia for over 100 years. And today, we can't even produce gloves, even if we can produce tires. You know, these sanitation gloves, these hospital gloves. There are a lot of other things that come from rubber, the soles of shoes, or just plastic shoes. There are no manufacturing plants. So these are employment in an environment of low employment, or very low employment. These are things that leaders can negotiate so that they increase, or reduce unemployment in the country. Because once you put a manufacturing plant, you are also then going to, produce jobs. But Firestone takes the raw product out, the rubber is tapped, they take the coagulant out, which is the hard rubber, and then they bring it and turn it into tires. Anything you can imagine that is made out of rubber, plastic gloves, condoms, all of those things that people use on a mass level. So there's a role of the leaders recognizing the value that we have and ensuring that that value is here, not for other people to extract and carry to them, but that value is here for us to use it for the well-being of our own people. So it's a matter of finding out that I have good brains, I can think, and I can produce value. But if you give it out to other people, it's not going to be the same when you get it back, because it's no longer for you. So that's where I talk about producing value, becoming not just consumers, but becoming producers. And there are many examples throughout the book, that talks about that. I hope I answered the question in the second round.
Well done. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That was an interesting round. So there's an interesting question also from Dr. Babila, but it's tied also to the next thing I was going to talk about. Let me just read something about Reverend Gee. So Reverend Gee believes that we were created to be interdependent rather than dependent, and that each nation should strive for self-reliance in a globally interconnected economy. He is an ordained minister, which is where my next question is coming, who has served ministries in Chicago and Monrovia. He is a global health professional serving as executive director for Liberia Career Pathways. We can see that this thing has been left in the hands of the ordinary citizen, and now we see clergy people pushing for change, mindset shift, because the ordinary African, or let me say the average African, is always acting from a place of lack, which is really not the case, because definitely they don't know what they don't know. So at the end of the day, what you people were talking of is really understanding what you don't know too, and then the spiritual aspect of what is taking place. What is it that is pushing you? So Dr. Babila's question comes in. He says following up is not part of a Christian mythology that allows things to exist in the Western mind only after they name them. So see Genesis and Berlin Conference. It says, as such, our lack of universal African religious mythology is not a huge problem. And then he says, in Judeo-Christian philosophy, it may seem ownership begins only after you name a thing. So we were named in Africa after existing for thousands of years, but somebody came and named us and gave us an identity. And from there, we forgot who we were. So what is this? From a clerical point of view too, because I'm a clergy at a university trained theologian too, we are always fighting with the question of identity, spirituality, and what is going on with the mindset shift and all those things. Can you enlighten us now on your spiritual the spiritual aspect of mindset shift, and what is going on with the Judeo-Christian thingy, philosophy in the question there. What is moving you as a clergy, coming up with this mindset shift and this generational baton handover?
Right. So, we serve the God of the universe. I mean, and again, this is a mental thing, this is a mind thing. The God we served, in some people's mind, is this: he can be small, he can be big, he can be powerful, he can be powerless, he can be merciful, he cannot. So it's all in the mind. It's all our perception of the divine, of the creator of the universe. And so for me as a clergyman, it came a point when I have to ask, what is the next level of my Christian life? And what should I preach as the next level of Christianity, of this Christian life that we are living? The theology of salvation, the theology of God's mercy and prayers, and all of that are great. But God is not limited to the church. He is the creator of the universe. Anybody who is not in the church is not excluded from God's governance or from God's mercy and God's goodness. He says the sun shines on both the righteous and the wicked. So God's intention for his universe, Paul writes in his letters, he said the whole word of God. In the book of Acts, for example, Luke talks about that. So what is the whole word of God? That Christianity is going to church on Sunday morning and doing all the moral things that we do, all of that is right. But you have to look at universal economic forces, human life, suffering and pain. What do we have to do for people to flourish? Is it in the word of God for people to be dependent or to be interdependent? And if you look in the scripture, Jesus said, I've come that all may have life and have it to the fullest. It's not one second of God's creation, to be dependent. I think of God's. So for me, when you start to see God as a creator and governor of the universe and the ultimate affairs of what happens in our world, and the fact that he has given us our brains, our minds, for us to put to work for our own well-being and for the well-being of the communities and the societies in which he has assigned us. So I reach a point that if God assigned Africa to Africans, then Africans have the ultimate responsibility. It's a God-given divine responsibility to make Africa to flourish, to make Africa to be a place where people can live, build wealth, raise their families, and a place that is desirable for everybody that want to live. We live in a global universe. Anybody can travel to where they want to go. But people should not feel this mindset that my best chance at life is somewhere else outside of the place of my birth. I don't think it's a good mindset.
Mm-hmm. So let me press on with the question again. Thank you so much. There's a press on with the question of, do you think a lack of universal African religious mythology could be a problem we are facing that is keeping us stagnant in a particular mindset you are trying to get us understand we have to shift from?
Right. So I can't talk about African religions too much, but I can talk about Christianity, for example. During the slave trade, right? During slavery, both the slave and the slave master were both reading the Bible. The slave master found in the Bible justification for enslaving other people. The slave found in the Bible justification for not being enslaved, but to be independent, to be free. So anybody can use, the scriptures. The scripture is given for all of us to read for ourselves. But so we cannot allow people to use the scripture or religion to push us out of God's will. So I don't think it has to do necessarily with religion itself as a whole. but it has to do with knowing who God, our creator, is, and the fact that he has given us our mind as our greatest natural resource, and that we should put it to work for our well-being and for the well-being of our communities and the people around us and our society broadly. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. For me, so Dr. Babila keeps on pressing on.
Okay.
And I think he's on the train. He cannot really talk because of the noise. So he says, yes, but if the West is using that to grow, the mindset shift, and treat others fairly and we not, don't you think Black practicing Judaism with gods of war and not the compassion as in Christianity is a problem?
No. I don't think Christianity is a problem. Christianity was what brought, freedom.
No, he didn't say Christianity is a problem. He says, don't you think Blacks practicing Judaism with gods of war and not compassion as in Christianity? So he's saying Christianity has compassion is the problem. So is that the message, as in this fact that Africans lack a particular kind of compassion? He says we mostly practice Judaism, calling it Christianity. I don't know about that very much, but he is trying to call on something as in compassion. If he can say a word, maybe he can say something. I know it's very loud where he's traveling right now, but maybe he can actually give the vision of his question very well. Maybe I'm not translating it very well.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm on the train. So basically, I mean, all over Africa, they practice Judaism and call it Christianity. So having gods of war, gods that are going to fight for people and all like, compared to Judeo-Christian nations where there's compassion, there's a good Samaritan, respect of time, respect of human beings. Don't you think this is where one of the problems is, that we misinterpret the software of Christianity?
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer. But I think sometimes people confuse God's kindness with being nice. I think those are two different things. The God, so one of the most dangerous things, and I think that the Angle will agree with me on this, and several people online do agree, is, as I was saying, is who do you think God is? Is he, because once you have our misunderstanding of God and the divine purpose for his creation can lead to a mindset that may not even be aligned with the divine order. But also, if I understood your question right, as I was saying, people can use the scriptures to achieve their purpose. I mean, we see this today. Pastors are preaching, and they are getting, rich. I'm not saying they're wrong, but they are taking a lot from, and then for their own purposes. Who the slave masters or the colonizers or the people who continue to exploit Africa, come and use scriptures to achieve their purpose, and the African Christian leaders then will have to teach, what is clearly God's will for us, so that we are not led or misled by other people's interpretation of scriptures. I hope that answers. I hope that's helpful.
Okay, no, I think I'm fine. Dr. Babila, are you satisfied?
And we can talk offline too. I'll be happy to talk offline. That's right.
Okay. So my very last question for today, so we can round up, I think, because we extended into the hour, is the whole thing about the topic, the title of the book, Generational Shift. Because you coined it in a nice way within the book, you actually try to spread it and passing the baton. So right now, I can say the world is divided into generations. You have pretty much the Generation X right now at the top of everything, even though the boomers are still on the head and still trying to pull things and refusing to pass. But we have other generations below. We have other generations. The millennials are behind there. We have the Gen Zs and the Alphas are now coming up very strong and powerful. So are you relating these generational shifts to this shift in these generational bodies? Because even us, now the people, the X's, they are like in their 40s and 50s right now. We're struggling to get the power. And I don't even know if when we have it, we will have the strength to use. But in your book, you are so much around generational shift and who are they giving the baton to? To us? By the time we realize, will we give it to the next? What is going on in this whole generational shift? Or is it just a mindset thinking that everybody should be ready to catch the baton and use it from your point of view?
Right. So the book, the way it is designed, it starts at a very, core part in society. So it starts in the family. If we teach our children their own dignity, their own, how to view themselves, their own image. And I know poverty can drive some of these things, but if we beginning at a family level to raise our children to see their own value, as Rena was asking earlier, do Africans not know the value that they have? Well, we have to teach our children the value that God has placed on them. It's not the external things that they see. That's important because it gets interpreted. But when it starts at that core level, it gives everybody the responsibility to contribute to the well-being of society, to the flourishing of society. So it doesn't just put the government, the Bible said to whom much is given, much is required. People who are in leadership, they have greater role, they got bigger roles. And, the different generations that you are describing, the Gen X, all of these, everybody have a role. So the book does not exclude any segment of the population. There is no, so that's why even the diaspora, there is a statement in it that says you have left, but you have not left the land. You are part of Africa. You can leave and go as far as you want. You are going to remain African forever. So you still have a role to play in the well-being of Africa, in the flourishing of Africa. So it's not one specific generation. It's not one particular demographic sector of the population, but everybody, So, and the idea is that to reduce poverty and suffering, when we begin to innovate, when we begin to engage in entrepreneurship and figure out ways for people to make a living outside of getting a job, but becoming creators, becoming job creators, and not just seekers of employment, becoming producers and not just consumers. This places the responsibility on everybody, not one specific segment of the population.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. So I just put Reverend Gee's web page online for you to click and know more about the book, see where you can get the book, and please support when you buy it, please review it. And there is so much to read on there. There's also the audible version that you can listen to. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you. Thank you for honoring the call. I see Professor Plo is gone already, so he had limited time. And yeah, we're grateful. I'll just honor the WAFOD members. Thank you very much, Wycliffe, Rina, NAMS, all the WAFOD members. Thank you. I see Matt. I see who again? Yeah, thank you. We are here for each other. We're spotlighting each other. We're talking about the book and getting the visions out because we are out to write and create change. Thank you for today and have a blessed day.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for this great conversation. It's really appreciated. So my name is Kenety G, and if it's just kenetygg.com, you take out the S in the middle, and it will take you right to my website.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Babila. Thank you so much. Great. So have a blessed day. Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Great job, Dr. Ongo.